your shower apartment doesn't have water. And so we're going to be talking about body image, among other things today. And you can't wash your hair. What's coming up right now?
Oh, I mean,
nothing really. Yeah.
Nothing really. Yeah. I mean, we didn't have a kitchen for a couple weeks. So that was worse than having no shower. So you make do. Yeah.
That was funny, like how you just pulled out about 5 different books. Were they all on, you were showing me some of the books that you pulled out from behind the curtain. Were they all like, you showed me one about body positivity. You showed me the intuitive eating workbook. Were they all on body image? Not all.
Most of them.
Most.
Yeah. Pretty much most. Yeah. So I have the 2 intuitive eating and these ones that you have as well. Mm-hmm. And then I have the body positive power, which is Megan Crabb, and she is amazing, intersectional feminist, all about body image.
Yeah.
And then I have one on, I'm not sure if you've heard of the beauty myth.
I have, but I didn't know it was a book.
Yeah, it's very good. So that one is Naomi Wolf. And then let's see, another book that I found is good is, it's very shiny. It's called Am I Ugly? Oh. It's about Michelle Owen's journey on finding body positivity as a surgery. She's had 15 different surgeries. So she has a lot of scarring. And so it's about finding body positivity through her trauma.
Yeah.
And then how
did you, so tell the audience, like, kind of how you started getting into this whole thing.
So pretty much I'm a certified intuitive eating counselor and neural wellness coach. So I'm currently living in Dublin and focusing on getting all of the certifications and requirements that I need to start up the curriculum that I'm hoping to start when I get back.
Yeah. So. And I know we connected a little bit over the whole ice skating. You were an ice skater and I was like a wrestler, and both were body image. Wrestling, not so much, not body image, but certainly body like pressure, I'll say. And body image, yeah, it'll look a certain way, but definitely like weight pressure. Is your experiences with ice skating, is that how you kind of developed an interest and even passion for body image, body positivity, etc.?
Definitely. I mean, that and also my personal experience. So growing up, I struggled with an eating disorder, and then I ended up getting injured as well when I figure skated. So the process of transitioning out of a competitive sport, as well as getting injured, as well as trying to find a new identity outside of skating and moving schools. So it was just a bunch all at once. So in that sense, that was definitely a huge factor. But figure skating is definitely a huge sport where people are susceptible to eating disorders just simply because of the nature of the sport.
Yeah. And you were into figure skating like big time. This was like a major part of when did you start figure skating?
I started figure skating was about 4 or 5.
Wow.
Yeah, so I started skating a long time ago, and started training outside of the greater Seattle area. So just north of Seattle, there's a little rink that I trained at. Very rundown rink, wonderful place.
Nice.
So had that as like a family support system.
Yeah. And so what was that like? Was there any like family pressure to do it, or it seems like you had a support system in there? Like, yeah, it seems like eating disorders, they can develop even in the most ideal circumstances.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I definitely didn't have any pressure from my family or my coaches in regards to losing weight or even succeeding in figure skating. I feel like I was the one who put all the pressure on myself. As a perfectionist, I wanted to be the best I could be, and look the part. And there is this emphasis on leanness due to the thought that it promotes this competitive advantage from like a biomechanical standpoint, and from a judging perspective on appearance. Plus the dress is worn super tiny, lot of they facilitate like competitive thinness and unhealthy body comparison. And then as well, you go on the ice and you're all alone. There's no team with you. There's nobody else, and all eyes are on you. And there's a lot of feelings, like feeling pressure associated with skating in regards to having to conform to this aesthetic ideal.
Sure.
If that makes sense. Like there's a figure skating image, I feel like, that's kind of out there, like the stereotype of like Barbie cookie cutter,
Totally.
twirls and sparkles and all of that, when in reality it's not just twirls and sparkles.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. How many figure skaters develop eating disorders? Because I know I hear in gymnasts cultures or like even bodybuilders, right, where they're a lot of times I think it's at a higher frequency than the average population. It develops into eating disorders. Do you know any of those numbers, or if an aesthetic sport is more likely to develop an eating disorder?
Yeah, so pretty much athletes in general are more likely to develop eating disorders than the average person. But in regards to weight class sports and aesthetic sports, up to 33% of the males and 62% of the females experience eating disorders. Yeah, so that's what we're finding, but oftentimes people estimate that it's a lot higher. There's a huge like don't ask, don't tell mentality. There's a huge, suck it up, like you're going to be fine, or your life is great. Why, you have the privilege to be able to skate. Why are you complaining? Like that kind of mentality. And pretty much, so they did a study on the symptomology of eating disorders in Canadian figure skaters and found that 92.7% of the skaters surveyed reported pressure to lose weight and were engaging in behaviors that were considered disordered eating. So it's like it's very common, but it's definitely not talked about. So that's part of the reason why I've been wanting to talk about this, is because contrary to the popular belief that there is one figure skating body, I don't believe that's the case.
Interesting. How'd you start to get out of okay, so you developed an eating disorder, part of along this whole culture of body pressure. And in my experience with wrestling, it was very normalized, right? Like, oh, of course, you might throw up, or you might make yourself throw up, or of course you might go to the sauna or to sweat it off or run like trash bags. And, of course, like that, of course, that's just wrestling. That's just ice skating. You do these compensation things because that's, of course, that's, it's not a problem. And I'm assuming there was some of that for you.
Well, I mean, definitely. I mean, it's very common. I mean, it was definitely sort of around. I grew up in it, so I didn't.
How did you recognize you had an eating disorder? Because I didn't until like almost in hindsight.
Oh, I mean, I definitely didn't either for a very long time. It wasn't until I got to college, actually, that started going downhill, and I ended up entering. There was a body image group on the campus that I went to. So I went to Western Washington University and double majored in biology and psychology. So while I was there, I was super fortunate to end up talking to the nutritionist at the school, who is health at every size, intuitive eating. I just didn't know. It was just happened to be that she was that person. And so she introduced me to intuitive eating, kind of helped me figure out all of the myths related to beauty, why the beliefs that I have are there and how they're incorrect. Like the false beliefs that I made up, like calories in equal calories out. Like, no, it doesn't work like that. So just like false beliefs that I had built up through.
Was there like ever a moment where that sparked you to go to the counselor? Like maybe you binged ate or even weren't eating, or you just had one time where you just were beating the crap out of yourself and you're like, this is not acceptable. I need some help right here.
Yeah, so actually it ended up, how the whole situation with how I ended up getting help is I was really sick. I couldn't keep food down. It ended up being related to something my very nasty ex-boyfriend gave me. So it was a side effect of that. So not being able to keep food down was just kind of feeding the eating disorder. So it was I can eat, food makes me sick. When in reality, it was I'm so nauseous already, and then adding the food makes me anxious, and then it increases my anxiety, which causes the butterflies in the stomach, which causes me to throw. So it was a whole process. But my roommates pretty much ended up sitting me down. They were like, we think you need some help. Like, this is not, you're not functioning.
Yeah.
You need to do something about this. So I
good.
had some awesome roommates to help me recognize that.
Good. Yeah. Because it's hard to recognize on your own. It can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. It can be. Okay. I got you. So you had this belief that what'd you say? Food makes me nauseous or something? Like,
so
food makes me nauseous, which is like so distorted because obviously you need food to live, right? And it's crazy how we develop these distorted beliefs.
Yeah. Well, you're scared. I was scared of like all food. I pretty much got myself to liquids, like smoothies and milkshakes. It didn't matter the calorie content. It was just the chewing that I think really got me. I was just getting so anxious about the fact that I was putting food in my body. So that was like the whole anxiety of like letting go of the control of that. And then also knowing that eating disorders aren't even about the food, like it's about the food, but it's not about the food.
Yeah.
It's like eating disorders are mental illness with potentially physical side effects, but you don't have to have physical side effects.
Yeah. What was it about for you?
In regards to,
so you get into the, so you said just eating disorders, they manifest as food. So apparently, like on the surface, they're about food, but they're really about something else. And so you get into the intuitive eating health at every size practitioner at school, and they kind of start peeling back the layers and countering some of these beliefs. And eventually you find out it's not about food, but it's about blank XYZ. What was that about? Was that kind of that residue from being an ice skater, or something else? It's kind of complex to speak about that, that inner part, but just curious.
I think it's honestly a combination. Like I remember my mother asked me, if you hadn't figure skated, because they didn't want me to figure skate. Like they were very against me doing it, but because they knew I loved it, they wanted to make, we want to make you happy and have you do something that you are passionate about. So even though it was a huge financial cost, they still really wanted me to do that. So in regards to the pressures, I didn't have it from my family. I had it from myself.
Yeah.
So it was always me, but regardless of whether I skated or not, I think I would have ended up the same way. It would have been regardless, because like personality types, different events, different traumas that occur, we cope the way that we can, that we cope the way that we are capable of at the time. And it's not a good or a bad thing. It's just how it is, We don't always have the skills to be able to manage things that life throw at us, especially at 11, 12 years old.
Totally. Like some of the ways we deal with that pressure and stress is by trying to control our weight, right? Like if you feel anxious, then you try to, exert control over food, because you can control food. I mean, like for a short period of time, it gives you that feeling of control. What were some of the myths that you started learning about in the intuitive eating health at every size lessons, the whole body image stuff? And you said earlier you had a distorted view of like body image or something like that you started realizing was false.
Well, I mean, definitely through going to the nutritionist and therapy and treatment, I started recognizing that the way I perceive myself is very different than the way everybody else does. I was very self-conscious, would care about even the random stranger on the street. They're thinking about me. It's like, no, they're not. They really don't care. So I think a large part of that aspect of it would be, weight stigma.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think weight stigma is a huge part of why we believe the things that we do, and it all stems from fat phobia.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing about some of these struggles you've been through and just getting into the detail. I really appreciate it. I think people, yeah, hear you. Weight stigma. If someone's never heard of weight stigma, what is it?
Weight stigma, it's literally stigma based on being at a higher weight. It's the simplest way to explain it. So pretty much, like, despite widely held popular beliefs that, higher body mass index causes poor health, data doesn't support that. Like, data cannot and does not support it. By all measures, BMI is awful to use for anything regarding public health and clinical interventions. And having a body above the healthy weight isn't necessarily the reason why people are seeing death related to obesity, quote unquote.
Okay.
They're often finding that it's the weight cycling that is shown to compromise physical health and psychological well-being. So it's the diet failure and the repeated rapid weight gain, weight loss, that is actually putting the stress cardiovascularly.
Interesting, because I was just going to play the kind of devil's advocate, I was going to say, yeah, I'm a full believer that BMI is terrible. It's absolutely ridiculous. Like, just a quick story. I used to be a personal trainer. A guy came in, he was like 5'5", 200 pounds. His BMI was incredibly obese, but this guy happened to be like absolutely shredded with muscle. I mean, you can imagine like biceps like the size of watermelons, right? And so his body fat percent, we gave him one of those things. It was like 15%, or whatever, something like that. It was actually pretty low. And I was like, oh, this guy's not quote unquote obese. Like, BMI is so skewed. But for those critics who would say high BMI, obesity, there's a lot of evidence, whatever, science that obesity is dangerous. But you're saying that it's not obesity per se, but oftentimes the weight cycling is the real danger.
Yeah, so a lot of studies don't necessarily control for disordered eating and dieting. Very rarely. So the study that I'm thinking of in particular is the Framingham Heart Study, which categorized about 500 men as stable non-obese, stable obese, weight loss, weight gain, and weight fluctuation, and watched them over 32 years. And they found that the stable obese category wasn't linked to any higher risk of death relative to the stable non-obese category. And it was actually the weight cycling, the weight fluctuation group that was shown to have compromised health and psychological well-being.
Whoa.
So there's a lot of issues with mediating variables. We always think that correlation is causation, and that's not the case. There's always tons of mediating variables, and it's very hard to pinpoint weight equals bad health. Like, we can't equate that, but because there's correlations, we assume that, because the person, quote unquote, has type 2 diabetes and is, quote unquote, overweight, that means that, that's the reasoning, when it's not the case at all,
Yeah. Totally hear you that. Wait, that's a great study. Holy crap. 500 people, 32 years. Oh my God. That's amazing. We'll link to that in the show notes.
Definitely.
Quick question. So we got weight stigma, this idea that higher weight is bad, and we're kind of starting to break that see that as not true. How does that get communicated? How do people get that in their brain? How do people believe that? What do you think I know there's 1,000 different ways, images and so forth. What do you think are the most powerful ways people get it in their head?
Honestly, I think this pathologizing weight as an epidemic has contributed to the notion that body weight is increasing exponentially when that's not the case. Obesity, quote unquote, obesity rates have stabilized in many of the countries, and I've never thought we have an obesity epidemic. I've never thought that we have an obesity epidemic. I figured that we have more of an epidemic of fat phobia, rapid weight stigma, weight cycling, and it's those effects of the systemic, culture that we're in that's causing all of these things.
Yeah.
I mean, the US is the most worried about weight, and we are like one of the most unhealthy countries. And it's like we have all of these dieting concerns. We have all of these different diets and cleanses and supplements and all of these things, but how come we keep increasing in weight? It's like, well, because weight loss doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. 95% of diets fail, and of those, 2/3 of the people gain more weight.
Yeah.
It's like, why? Like,
it's madness. Yeah.
Yeah, it's madness.
It's madness. It's absolutely. I like how it's almost like, from my perspective, it's like, how do people get fooled by this madness? I understand that there's kind of this like almost like medically backed, like all of our institutions, from hospitals to schools to wherever, public health programs, they're all saying obesity is this huge problem. Is that how we get it in our head, or how did you get it in your head, I guess? How do you think you got it? I guess just culture.
Yeah, culture. I mean, there was this huge, I think, fear of gaining weight that I had growing up. I know, so partially from just life outside of figure skating, and then also from life in figure skating. A huge issue with figure skating in general is puberty. Oftentimes you hit puberty and your bodies change. You develop, and it completely alters your weight distribution. And unfortunately, a lot of athletes attempt to postpone their body's natural development. And it's these undernourished and overexercised young bodies that are very prone to injury and are susceptible to eating disorders. And so these eating disorders are reducing muscle strength, reducing endurance, which are critical to wrestling, critical to figure skating, critical to most sports. And I mean, you need proper fuel and nourishment to be able to feed your body and have the strength, endurance, and mental focus to train and execute the jumps and the spins and anything at the highest level. So in regards to spaced on the original question.
I got you. I kind of asked a vague question. I asked, how did you get it? And we kind of concluded culture, which just all the different
culture
things, our parents, just seeing images in the media and so forth. So now you're in college and you're getting help, and you're being exposed to things you're seeing things that aren't, you're like weight stigma. You realize, oh, weight stigma is like not true. What are basically, how did you start to cure your eating disorder? What are the top 3 things? I mean, not to overly simplify it, top couple of things that really helped you cure your eating disorder, and what was that whole thing? What was that whole journey like? We'll kind of explore that a little bit. It seems like a big part of this was dealing with those thoughts about people looking at you, or that having food was going to lead to weight gain, and weight gain was terrible. How did your journey start to heal? How did the healing journey start?
So, I mean, in college, I had my undergrad degree, I had a great bunch of professors that did introduce, positive body image. I had a abnormal psychology professor who was interested in eating disorder research. So going throughout my psychology degree, I kind of had that in my mind of that seems like what's what I want to do. But my whole thought process was, how can I do it if I'm the one who can't eat? Why am I doing this? So that definitely was a huge motivating factor, was me wanting to help people, me wanting to share my story and share that even though there are these pressures in figure skating with puberty, there's pressures in the culture of developing and becoming an adult. There's so many body changes. It's like waking up with a third arm one day. It'd be it's shocking, It's we go through these body changes so quickly, and we need to process that. And as someone who was trying to postpone everything, you know, and then getting injured and then getting it. I think that was just a huge factor of it in general. So that'd be one.
Yeah.
Let's see. Two, in regards to figuring. So in regards to the second thing, I would say that realizing that binging is not eating from huge, like, the term that I'm thinking of is like the hunger that you just, or the ravenous hunger. There's a specific intuitive eating term for it, like the famine response, where you just get so hungry. So I kept
deprivation.
assuming, I'm going to remember it here soon anyway. But
feast famine or something like that. Feast famine,
so it's like you have this huge drive to eat, but it's like when you go through periods of famine, of course you're going to end up increasing your food intake and eating a ton of food. It's just, you swing from one to the other. So recognizing that these quote unquote binges that I thought I was having were pretty much my lifeline. Like those are what was keeping me alive during the time of severe restriction, were these random days where I would eat lots of stuff and exercise compulsively. And like those were the best thing that I had at the time to keep me alive. So I don't want to say that those are bad things, like compulsive exercise and all of these things. I don't want to look back and shame it, because it happened, and it was what got me through.
I love that.
Like, I don't want to pathologize, overeating or pathologize quote unquote binging, because shaming yourself doesn't help.
That's one of the ways we start to like reframe all these behaviors and helping people see them, is by, showing you're feeling this pressure or something, and the only way you knew how to handle that pressure was to probably restrict and try to control. And then when you restrict it, that famine comes, and then of course, like, that your body's starving to death because you're trying to control it. And then so it's like seeing those feast things as, these are the best ways our body is trying to protect us, and body's doing the best it can, using its, default programming and cultural conditioning.
Definitely. Well, and we're always told that it's this quote unquote willpower that we have. We're supposed to be tough. We're supposed to be strong. Like, we're not supposed to come forward and complain about being hurt, because, that makes you weak. But it's like, there's so many biological mechanisms that are built to get us to eat. So it's like saying I have to pee, but I'm not going to pee for 5 more hours.
I'm going to hold my breath, right? That's
it's like it doesn't work.
Or if you hold it out, rather, if you breathe all the air out and hold it, that's like the famine.
Like, you can't. Of course, you're going to end up gulping in the air. That's pretty much the same thing that you do with food. Like, if you are under the water for a minute and then you come up, you're going to gasp for air, and then then normalize. And that's what ends up happening with food too. Is when you start the intuitive eating journey, sometimes you go through that honeymoon phase of everything is amazing and I can eat this and this and this and this, but in reality, if you're eating cake every day, you won't feel good. So it's about recognizing how the food that you're eating feels in your body.
I loved that word you use, honeymoon. Sometimes people are afraid of that.
Oh, that's not my term at all. That's Christy Harrison. She has the Food Fake podcast. She terms like the honeymoon phase, or like those kind of terms. She has a bunch of them that I reference, actually.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so I just want to kind of keep hearing about your journey on healing, and try to tie all these things together. I love it. So far, we've gotten you're countering the thought of weight stigma. You're what's it called? You're motivated because you're in the program, right? You're like in the psychology program. So you're really trying to get motivated. And that extra motivation is key oftentimes. Yeah. And then you're starting to get education about binge eating and the feast and famine cycles and how they're kind of inevitable. How long, what was your timeline like? Like sometimes these concepts, if you're seeing, I don't know how often you were seeing the counselor or therapist at the school,
Yeah.
but if you're seeing them once a week, sometimes just an hour conversation is like, it's barely enough, right? It's like
Yeah.
there's so much education. How was your timeline, so to speak, on the healing journey?
So I struggled with disordered eating behaviors probably from about the time I was 11 or 12 to about 20 was when I started treatment. And I mean, treatment's always going to be up and down. Like that's
Yeah.
part of how it is. So I thought I was, doing recovery for about 2 years, wasn't actually doing recovery. So it was really within the last 2 years that I've been really dedicated to keeping myself moving forward and, reminding myself to eat and do that stuff. One of my best friends passed away back in September. She
Anorexia? Or
suicide, actually. She took her own life. She struggled with major depressive disorder, and she was also a figure skater. Very good. Very, very, very good. So, that event definitely was a wake-up call for me.
Yeah.
In general, I mean, it wasn't unexpected. I'd known about her suicidality for
Sure.
7 years, and we've been friends and gone through all of that. But it still shakes you, but that definitely was a huge motivation, because, there's so many things that you can do, so many warning signs, so many red flags that people just don't see. And it's about educating people. It's about, giving people all of this knowledge, because it really is just simply a lack of knowledge. Like the issues we have in the world are simply like lacks of knowledge and lack of understanding and compassion. So it's like if we have increased understanding and try to come from another perspective, come from another point of view, then we'll be able to, increase our knowledge and be able to solve problems.
Yeah. I had a question. You said you started treatment, but then you said something like, but I wasn't really doing treatment. Like it sounded like you had a pivotal moment where you're like either recommitted to it or understood more deeply what it was about. What was that transition where what was that about?
There was a couple of events, like traumatic events that happened around that time that I think kind of was like I'm either going to do it or I'm not going to do it. Like it's all or nothing at this point. And I wanted to do research in eating disorders on campus with the professor that I was mentioning earlier, but you have to be in recovery or out of treatment for 2 years. And so that was also a motivating factor. Was I knew I wasn't ready, but I really wanted to join this research team, but I wasn't ready. So I ended up never actually joining it, because I never ended up making it in time. But so far it's been about a 4-year process, and I'm finally now at a point where I'm like comfortable, where I've gained a lot of weight, like a lot of weight.
Good.
So it's a matter of like being okay with the fact that my body's changed. My body isn't the way it was when I was 16 and training 25 plus hours a week. Like of course there's no way my body is not gonna be that way, and it's not supposed to. Like we really don't need as much exercise as we're scared into believing we need. It's this we need to be at the gym for so many hours a day, or go to the gym extra for after training. Like all of these things are seen as things that good athletes do, but it's like, when does it cross the line? Like when is it cross from being dedicated to your sport and crossing over to being obsessive? So it's like trying to find that line and learn what is healthy and be able to identify it.
Yeah. What was the hardest part that was stopping you from quote unquote, like, not to say just do it, because that implies willpower, but when you were going through that, am I really going to do it? And you were like, yeah, I'm really going to do it. Like, I'm really going to quote unquote do it. I know a big part of that is probably like listening to your body, right? You mentioned the feast famine. So if you were in a famine, you got to eat, and your body's giving you signals to honor those signals. What else did you mean by so two-part question. What else did you mean by do it? And then what was stopping you from doing it fully before?
So I think if I were to answer those backwards, I think that might make more sense. So the biology aspect of it was a huge help for me. I'm a huge science geek, love, knowing the nuts and bolts of everything and how everything works. So learning about how there are different enzymes and neuropeptides that so there's this thing called neuropeptide Y that triggers the drive to eat carbs. So pretty much when you don't eat food, this neuropeptide Y increases. So it's like, and that's what drives these want to eat all the chips or all the candy. It's like you want fuel that's like fast to break down. So once I finally started learning all of these facts, I was able to start training my brain. So whenever I had a thought, I'm like, okay, let's take a step back. What's actually the fact? This is my belief. What is the actual truth behind this? So one of the examples that I'm thinking of is I used to think that if I'm not exercising, then I don't need to eat. Like that was one of my backwards logics, because I went from exercising a ton to not training. And so I started obsessively exercising and training for something that didn't exist. So it's like, but in reality, only 5% of stored fat can be converted to carbohydrate fuel. So I was doing all of these things and I ended up getting my body into honestly, don't even know, my metabolism completely shut down. And so I was obsessively exercising, not eating hardly anything. And I was gaining weight rapidly. I gained about 30 pounds in 2 months, eating nothing and exercising obsessively. Yeah. Well, no, I wasn't actually. That's the scary part, is I wasn't binging.
Oh, because it slowed down.
My metabolism slowed down. I didn't been doing it for so long that I just done. My body, it was like panic mode. I'd step on the scale and I'm like, what is going on? My weight is higher and I haven't eaten a bite of food. And I just did 6-mile run and biked for 15. So it's like, why is this? And it's like, well, our body is meant to stay at a specific weight. Like our body doesn't want to be at a lower weight. And every single time we go through these weight loss and weight gains, it makes it harder to lose weight. And it makes it harder to stay at the weight that we were originally going to be at, because it pushes our set weight up higher. So it's like, once I started losing all of these, or learning all of these different aspects and learning about how all these diets, debunking all of these diets, keto diet, I think is oh my gosh, that one. It's low carb fasting, and ultimately the fasting and low carbs diets cause people to lose weight quickly because they're devouring their own protein tissues as fuel. So even though your heart is deteriorating, it has to keep up with the same amount of work. So ketosis is this adaptation to prolonged fasting and carbohydrate deprivation. So the issue is that your brain can only use about 50% of the compounds that are made from this. And so when fat is used under conditions of severe deprivation, the body's muscles continue to lose weight or continue to be lost at a rapid rate in order to supply glucose to the nervous system. Does that make sense? So it's there's so many things that are manipulated and twisted that are not true. And looking back, it's I was digging myself into a hole, but it was just all of these false beliefs that I had built up. And also the fact I was keeping it a secret. Nobody knew. If anybody who knew me would probably have said put together, straight A student, getting, accomplishing goals, achieving everything that I can. But at the same time, I'm incredibly unhappy and hiding it and, that kind of thing. Because we're good at faking it. You fake it till you make it, It's just kind of how it is. So
you mentioned a thought would come, and you gave an example of where you'd question the thought of okay, so I feel this desire to compulsively exercise, and you kind of counter that thought by saying, well, exercise really only converts 5% of stored fat to calorie burning. So
that is if you're in ketosis, you know?
Yeah. So you kind of fight it. I'm betting, and that thought probably felt like a compulsion, right? It wasn't just like a little whimsical thought in your head. It was like your body was like, go exercise, like that compulsion.
Yeah.
And so many people bring to me questions around food cravings, right?
Yes.
And kind of a different, kind of related but different topic. The food craving comes up sometimes out of a lack of education, right? If you don't know about famine, of course you're going to have food craving.
Mm-hmm.
So, but when you're aware and you have a craving or a compulsion to eat food, and you're kind of aware, let's say you're well fed, but even then you might still have that default programming just from years of doing it. How do you work with that? How do you work with compulsions?
Definitely getting an awesome nutritionist and therapist are highly recommended, and being able to work through a lot of these things. But yeah, like I was saying earlier, definitely, taking the statement that you keep telling yourself, taking a step back and recognizing, is this true? Or like, what are the reasonings behind why I'm thinking this?
Mm.
And then what is the actual fact? Like, for example, I'd be, I have to go out and run again today because otherwise I'm going to gain a bunch of weight. And it's like, well, let's break this down. Like missing another run is not going to change my body in any way. In fact, it's probably going to help more if I don't, because it's going to be restorative. It's going to be, so it's like breaking it down, or even asking, in regards to compulsive exercise, would I be exercising if my body didn't change at all? Like if I knew my body wasn't going to change, would I still be doing this activity? And if the answer is yes, then keep doing it. But if the answer is no, I want to lose weight, then it's maybe finding a different activity that you can approach from a different point of view.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Yeah. Yep. This is the heart where you're able to kind of dialogue, first of all, establishing that connection with your emotions, right? So instead of just being driven by the craving, compulsion, you're feeling it, you're aware of it, you're recognizing it, you're kind of, I say dialoguing, like understanding what it's saying and maybe even talking to it. I love it. Yeah.
Kind of break it down a little bit.
Break it down, process it.
Yeah.
That's
well, it's like knowing that it's not about the food. Eating disorders, oftentimes with like obsessive compulsive behaviors, anything along those lines, it's never about the actual thing you're doing. It's about something else. It's distracting you from what's truly, taking place in your life. So if we can, slow down and ask ourselves, if it isn't about the food, if it isn't about the drink, the substance, if it isn't about blank, then what am I upset about, or what am I feeling? It's all about trying to check in inward and figure out what you're feeling. So a lot of times, I was so out of touch with all of my feelings. So a lot of the times the therapist would ask me what I'm feeling. I'd be like, I have no idea, not the slightest clue. And so she'd be like, okay, well, let's figure it out. Like, where do you feel it in your body? And I'd be like, well, I'm really nauseous and I'm kind of freaking out. So it's like, oh, well, maybe you're panicking or that kind of thing. So being able to slow down and tune inward and be like, well, if it isn't about food, then what's it about? And what am I actually feeling? Then you can actually assess what your needs are and start adding things in, because it's not about taking away the food. If you rely on food as a coping mechanism, then the last thing you're going to want to do is take away the food. Then you have no coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Like how are you supposed to help yourself if you don't introduce other things first? So with emotional eating often gets such a bad rap with diet culture, because it tells us we should only eat when our stomachs are growling. Other than if we eat more than that, it's considered more than enough, but research actually shows that like people who are concerned about their eating behaviors may retrospectively attribute overeating to emotion and stress, because emotional eating is becomes so commonly accepted as an explanation for food choices we judge for like consider less than desirable. So like human beings eat for so many different reasons, whether it's, taste good, social, cultural, like sometimes this includes eating when we're sad and hungry, and it's not a bad thing. It only becomes a problem when it's the only coping skill you have. And in that case, if it is the only coping skill you have, it'd be about introducing different ways to regulate your emotions other than just food. It might be, take a step back. Instead of going and eating whatever you wanted to eat and binge on, maybe just sit down and journal for 10 minutes. Then if you still want to eat, do it, nothing wrong with that. That's okay. So it's like about introducing different things, because if you take it away, then you're just introducing that deprivation mentality that everyone talks about so much, and then it's like, of course you're going to have a drive to do it. There's a study where they told a bunch of kids that they couldn't eat the red things, and they started literally a study where they said red foods, like you can't have them, they're bad. And they did it with a bunch of kids. And what do you know? The food they wanted was the red one, whether it was a strawberry, like any kind of fruit or anything. So it's like they didn't even, I think they did it with M&Ms. And so it was like they ate more red M&Ms than any other color M&M just because they were told that it was bad. So it's like the mind like completely switches it around on you if you don't like offer it.
Totally. Yeah.
So,
did you ever, sometimes people, they're kind of binging, I'll say, or their feast cycle occurs sort of in like the social context. Was that ever, I don't think that would be a problem that you went through because it was so secretive for you, but maybe, I'm just curious. And if you had any words of wisdom for someone who basically they're a careful eater, quote unquote, like careful as in too careful, or restrained or restricted or whatever. And their problem is that they go out and, they go to a birthday party, they go to a wedding, and they have an active social life. So they're out a lot, they're exposed to it. And then that's when they, deal with some things like that. I find it hard to work with that, because it's like when you're by yourself or you're eating secretively, it's like it's distractions. It's like it's hard to like have that clarity of mind when you're out with friends. Any words of wisdom around that?
Definitely. I started with the opposite thing. Mine would be trying to get myself to go to these social events and eat. So I definitely struggled a little bit on the opposite side of it. But even then, you have to like recognize that events, like we bond over food. It's like we go to birthday parties for cake, we like these things are part of our culture, and it's not a bad thing to engage in it. Like just because we go to a party and there's a bowl of chips, like if it sounds good, go ahead and have a few chips. But if you're spending the entire night at the bowl because you don't have chips at home, and you only eat chips because you have chips here and it's just the one time you can have them, of course you're going to eat the entire bowl. And it's like, then it starts to be interfering with your everyday life.
Yeah. That those concepts of deprivation are so key. Did you have just kind of like last few questions here, but cycling way back to that honeymoon thing, because oftentimes when someone's a restricted eater, they're depriving those, chips and tacos and whatever. And then when they're at the party, of course, they're going to have them because. So
might as well.
Yeah, right. So we introduced these foods, and then I loved the phrase honeymoon. Did you go through a honeymoon phase where you're like, oh my God, I can eat this stuff and blah, blah, blah?
Definitely with some foods. Bagels, I literally hadn't had bagels, no cream cheese, like nothing. And I couldn't even remember what it tasted like. And my nutritionist brought in a bunch of bagels and cream cheese one day and was like, we're having these. And the panic was like, but bagels are like one of my favorite things now. So in that sense, there are, like when I started eating bagels, there were days that I was like, all I want are bagels. And I would have 3 bagels and cream cheese throughout the day at each meal. And I would have to remind myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm eating so many bagels, but it's like, hold on, if you look at the lifespan, most people have bagels in there. Like bagels are normal, they're healthy, there's nothing wrong with bagels. So it's recognizing these false beliefs and recognize that it's all about this unconditional permission. Like when you truly give yourself their permission to eat, then those cravings go away. So I'm not eating bagels still. Like I had one I think yesterday for lunch, but it's like that's not the point. Like it ends up going away because over time you habituate to it. The more you have a food, the less interesting it becomes. Like the first bite of food is always the best. First couple bites are amazing, and then the food starts getting more bland as you get more full. Like there's ways that your body has habituated you to handle food and feel your fullness and honor your hunger. Like there's mechanism, like your body knows what to do if you let it. It's just a matter of not messing it up. So, and like Evelyn Tripoli was saying that in her book, she calls it pseudo dieting. What a lot of people are doing now, it's like this. They say they're not on a diet, but it's really a diet. It's the eating only quote unquote safe foods or drinking coffee or soda instead of eating, or going gluten-free for reasons other than being celiac. Sure. There are a lot of, like if you're celiac, you're celiac, do not touch gluten. But if you're gluten intolerant, it's usually more to do with the microbiome. So in fact, you're actually supposed to increase your gluten intake. You're supposed to build up that microbiome so that it can handle the gluten. It's like, that's really what it is. So people cutting gluten out more is just creating more of a problem. So it's like, there's so many, but if you eat gluten-free, then you might lose weight. So it's like, there's so many things that people are doing, extra exercise for a bad food day, or like meticulously counting, calories or carbs, or, all of these things are still dieting. Like, even if you might not be quote unquote on a diet, it's still the diet mentality. And you're still going to be finding yourself having these uncontrollable cravings over things that you find quote unquote bad,
Last question, I think. But no, what would be your 3 biggest transformations as a result of going through this process?
Well, I look back and I missed out on so much of my life, like an enormous amount of part of my life. I didn't have a lot of friends in high school because I spent it exercising before and after, spent time exercising before and after school. So definitely being able to have more opportunities, more event, like things that I can enjoy without having to think about food. Because when you're thinking about food 24/7, you can't focus on anything else. Like you sit in class, and I remember looking at the board and spending the entire time thinking about food and being hungry. And it's like, that's not, not really functional. Otherwise, coming to terms and healing your relationship with food. I'm definitely not there. I'm not like good to go. Like I still struggle. I still have my days where like, I don't want to eat, but it's about like keeping moving forward. And there's so many more opportunities that I have in my life now that I have, like when you free up that headspace that food and diet culture have back there, it allows you to have so much more room in your life to have other things come in, and you'll actually be able to see the opportunities. So like, for example, I would never have moved to Dublin, Ireland, because I'm currently living in Ireland. Like if you had asked me 2.5, 3 years ago, I would have said, there's no way I'm moving out of the country. Like, no way. It's so out of my comfort zone. There's no way. But now it's like, it's what I'm doing. I'm living over here. I'm currently creating the nutrition education and mental health resilience curriculum online. So it's going to be an online curriculum for athletes in aesthetic and weight class sports. And it's going to be combining intuitive eating principles, health at every size, neuro wellness, health and wellness coaching, and the Be Body Positive model to, help people come to terms with things in their life and focus on how to cultivate positive body images and self-care skills.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I think that was 3, right?
That was amazing. That was good. So someone is interested. I love how you're so specific, body image and aesthetic sports. Like, if someone is interested, what does that mean, and where could they find that course of yours, or where will it be at? How can people get?
Um, well, it's not out yet.
Okay,
Still
okay,
finishing
yeah,
it. I just finished the actual curriculum part of it. Now I just have to go through the legal formats of starting the business and getting all of the legal things to be able to do it. But I'm hoping to be able to start it in January or February next year. And you'll be able to find that at nowbodywellness.com. And I can send you all of the information for that and some links.
yeah. Aimee, thank you so much for this everything.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah,
Oh,
like
it's been fun.
your what is it? I don't know, just like no stigma strength, I'll say. Your no stigma courage, or no stigma, just no stigma, or whatever. Your no stigma wisdom and vulnerability about sharing. Oh, so good. Like, that's
Yeah,
so good.
vulnerability is a
People,
huge one, I believe.
yeah, I love it. Okay, thank you so much.